Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Byrd. It is, as I am speaking to you, recording this, it is Tuesday, April 14th. And I want to cover two topics with you today. One we'll move through fairly quickly, and then we're going to move into the other one in a little bit more detail. And they are over-the-counter drugs and medicines and Cobra. So on the OTC issue, I want to give you an update on the CJIS process. If you recall, we had told you that the first thing that has to happen for OTC drugs and medicines to be available on the debit card is for CJIS to get through its process of updating its eligible product list and making that list available to merchants. I'm happy to report that CJIS beat its announced deadline by 2 days. And so yesterday, on April 13th, in the afternoon, CJIS did make that list available for download by merchants. And so merchants hopefully now are beginning the process of downloading that list into their POS databases. I want to say we're really, really grateful to the staff at CJIS and to the eligible products list committee who toiled long and hard to expand that list to include the OTC drugs and medicines. And many of our partners have individuals who serve on that committee, so our heartfelt gratitude to you. I want to remind everybody that merchants will not all immediately download the list. And so the merchants are likely to be downloading that list over the next 30 days. What that means is you can expect some uneven consumer experience where their debit card may work to buy Tylenol at one merchant and it might not work at another. So everybody should be prepared for some elevated level of inquiries from consumers. And your message to them should be to reassure them that it takes time for the merchant community to adopt. And once they do, this process will be working seamlessly, much as it did before 2013 and those changes that came about then. One other important point that we really haven't touched on before, but there's some mention, is check your employer plan documents, whether you're an administrator or a broker, or if you happen to be an employer watching this, check your plan documents. Most employers, we understand, did change their plan documents in 2013 to exclude OTC drugs and medicines unless they had a prescription. And so there needs to be a simple change to those plan documents to make them now conform with the new law and make those items available without a prescription. You can amend that plan retroactively. You can technically amend it all the way back to the beginning of the year, but that isn't necessary. And for many people dealing with a flood of manual claims for purchases that were made in January, February, and March is not worth it. And so a prospective change is certainly okay. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that beginning today, these items will begin to work in some merchants on debit cards. So employers should make that effective date, I think, no later than April 14th or April 15th to avoid compliance issues, because people will be able to take their debit cards and purchase those items at beginning today. So now I want to turn to Cobra, and this is where we're going to spend most of our time today. First, I want to share what we're seeing across our book at WEX Health as a leading platform provider to the Cobra industry. We think that the volume of specific rights notices being generated by the platform for our partners is a really, really good leading indicator of what we can expect in terms of Cobra activity, both initial phone calls coming in from people wanting to understand what their options are and wanting some guidance to help them through the decision process. And then later on, as people enroll, what that increase in enrollment is going to look like. I will tell you, we have begun to see that volume pick up over the last 3 weeks or so. Beginning the week of March 23rd, that first week, it was up over 25% over the previous volume that had been pretty steady for the month or two before that. And then in each of the last 2 weeks, we've seen that spike up to over 50% increase from that baseline. How long this lasts is impossible to predict. The initial jobless claims, if you look at those statistics, have been incredibly, incredibly huge. And we know that there's been a processing backlog at many state unemployment agencies. And so I would suggest that this has a way to run, and everybody should be preparing for that increase in volume. Now to a legislative update. Some of you may have heard that there's been talk in Washington about a Cobra subsidy program. I can confirm that it is actively being discussed in Congress as we speak. The initial approach that we have seen is modeled after the 2009 stimulus bill. And we are engaged with the committee and leadership staff, and we really have two aims there. One is to advocate for a Cobra subsidy, but as importantly, to provide technical input on the administrative complexities of certain approaches and to make sure that we're balancing the administrative simplicity of getting this kind of a program operationalized with helping people. The current plan in terms of timing is to have Congress reconvene live next week. That's the week of April 20th in Washington. But I would note that this remains aspirational at this time and really subject to confirmation. As we know, things are very fluid in terms of the pandemic and how people are moving about the country. And then more specifically in terms of timing, it really depends on how narrow the bill that Congress starts to put together next week is. There is an approach that has next week's activity really focused on reloading some of the support programs that were included in the CARES Act. There will no doubt be some other peripheral stuff that gets put into such a bill. But if it is very, very narrow, it's not likely that a Cobra subsidy is going to be included in a package that they would hope to pass next week. If it isn't, then they will come back and there will be most likely a COVID-4 bill. Call next week's bill COVID 3.5. There will be a COVID-4 bill, and that's likely to be a May instrument. On the other hand, it's entirely possible that a Cobra subsidy gets jammed into next week's bill. So we're just going to have to wait and see, but sort of two possible outcomes in terms of timing if a Cobra subsidy bill passes. And then finally, as a segue off of that, we have been getting a fair number of questions from partners about our system readiness for a Cobra subsidy. The good news is that we've supported a broad subsidy program in the past. I mentioned the 2009 stimulus bill. And we have somebody who was there at the time. So here to talk about that is my colleague, product manager, Kelly Sopinski. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that segue, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to be on here and talk about the upcoming changes with the Cobra subsidy. As Chris stated, we are still waiting for the bill to be voted on. So I know that is putting everybody in an uncomfortable situation, wanting to know what those details are and wanting to know what WEX's plan will be. And I think for some of you, it's probably a little confusing to know, does WEX have a plan? Because WEX did not have a Cobra administration or Cobra platform back when the original 2009 bill and Cobra subsidies were in place. But as he had stated, with the acquiring of Renaissance, about 4 to 5 years ago, Renaissance did go through the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2009. I was on that team as well as others that are still here with WEX. And so we would really want to be on here to reassure you that while we don't know the details yet, we are prepared with knowing what to expect when the bill comes through. I have been meeting with the development team already, getting everybody prepared, educating them on what the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act included. There are those certain things that you really need to be aware of, that we need to be aware of. For example, the look back period. We know that similar to the ARA bill, the new CARES Act bill will have a look back period as well, where at a point in time when that bill is enacted, we will go back to a certain date, and the proposed date is January 27th, to say anybody who experienced an event from that point forward would be included in the subsidy and the potential to be eligible for that subsidy. And of course, with that, that's a re-notification of members that are in the system or the current members. So you might be looking at that and saying, wow, that's going to be a big deal. How am I going to estimate what that could be? So today, the system already provides you with the tools to go in and look to see the letters that have been generating. So go through your generated letters reports to get an idea of the look back or the number of folks that you're going to have to notify in that look back period. So again, those are some little things that we know will come up in the bill. There are some things that are very similar today, so that is a benefit to us. We should be able to, kind of plug some of those dates and pieces of information into the system and act fairly quickly. So again, we want you to be reassured that, as Chris stated, WEX is fully involved with the bill, knowing where it's at in the voting, and we are actively preparing right now until we get the vote and the final details. So again, we hope that everybody has confidence that WEX will provide what we can to you when we get the details. Once we have those, we will present to our partners in a WebEx the details of what we will be doing and the plan of action to go forward. If you have any questions, though, myself and my boss, Matt Dallahan, are always available to answer those. Thank you.
I want to stress a couple of things in closing about Cobra. First of all, it's by no means a done deal. A subsidy plan might pass or it might not pass. It's really kind of bayonet in the teeth time down in D.C. These are highly political times, and there are a lot of moving parts in a very, very big bill. So we shouldn't assume that it's going to pass, but we're planning as though it will. The second thing that's really important is that, and Kelly mentioned this, I want to reemphasize, nobody knows exactly what all of the details of a Cobra subsidy program will look like if it does pass. It is really, really fluid in DC, and there are a lot of competing interests. There are a lot of things that are being brought into the conversation. What I can tell you is that we are, and we intend to the greatest extent possible, remain actively engaged with staff in DC. And that's both to provide feedback and input to the Hill, but also to bring back what we learned to our product and technology teams. So Kelly, Matt, and the really smart people in our team, we've been talking to them regularly about what we're hearing. And as we hear of any new developments, we're bringing back to the team so that hopefully we're on our toes and we're leaning forward into this. Our goal, obviously, is to have a Cobra subsidy program that works for Americans who've been economically displaced by this terrible pandemic, but also one that balances the administrative needs of both employers and plan administrators. One thing that I think we all can take a lot of comfort in, and we can take it as our collective challenge, is we're now in the helping economy. People need help. People need a subsidy. They need health insurance assistance. And if we can help them, then we are doing our part. And as always, if you have any questions, you can send them to Kelly or Matt, or you can send them to your partner account executive. Thank you all for tuning in and watching, and have a great day.